It's 20 years now since the Arctic Council got officially started. That's a long time, and in some ways not a long time, but a lot has happened. Rosemarie, do you have a thought about what it was like when we started off campaigning and trying to get Canadian interest going in the very idea of an Arctic Council?
Well, I really didn't think it was going to happen in the beginning because there were so many differing opinions, as you recall, with respect to the Arctic Basin Council and what were the permanent participants going to look like and how much influence are they going to have, what kind of stewardship are they going to have, you know, and all of these questions. And in reflecting back on it, I know the Arctic is a very important region right now. But I'm happy with the way the permanent participants are, the way we envisioned it in the beginning, because the Arctic Council is a forum where there is no voting. It's a consensus forum, so the way you get rid of an issue is to disagree.
But you remember, in a larger perspective, we'd all grown up in a Cold War context in which the Arctic was kind of divided between Russia, Soviet Union at the time,
and all the rest,
and the West. And up until well into the 1980s, this confrontation across the Arctic basin seemed to be a fact of life. And then things started to change. And it was remarkable how quickly the larger kind of geopolitical context changed.
That ice started to break a little,
Yes. And there was Gorbachev's speech in Murmansk in 1987. We started to have meetings across the East-West divide. All of a sudden, it seemed like a log jam was broken, that there was a pent-up interest in cooperation which had been unable to manifest itself for the past. And suddenly, lots of things became possible.
When we started talking to Northerners, especially Inuit, about the Arctic Council and that whole idea, we had a bit of trouble getting people to realize the potential of setting up an international forum, because it seemed distant to them. At the same time, it's my memory that in Canada we ran into trouble with our government. The government really was not paying attention to the Arctic. In fact, they thought it was a pain in the butt to be doing these kinds of things when there was the Middle East, European security, all these other things to talk about. And they didn't want to spend time on the Arctic. So we had a bit of an uphill. Even though the Cold War was going warmer, we had trouble. It wasn't easy.
It was not an easy process. In fact, it was very difficult. That's why I was saying, you know, I wasn't sure if it was going to be realized in the end because of all these, the politicking that was going on all over the place. But I think it's going to be a really useful organization if they can begin discussing such issues in the future as security, because security is not limited to militarization, and the Arctic is a very important region of the world. It's a barometer, and even though we have only like a very small number of people, it's a very important player in the geopolitics of the Arctic Council.
If you think you had a hard time with your government,
probably.
Think of the difficulty we had with the government of the United States. And as you well remember, earlier drafts of what became the Ottawa Declaration had considerably more content. And the U.S. would each time object. We can't accept this, we can't accept that. And finally, the Ottawa Declaration is a very short document with a very small amount of content, and that's what, in the end, the U.S. was willing to accept, saying, well, we'll do this, but not more.
It's really interesting, therefore, how far the U.S. has come from then till now in 20 years. And the U.S. position is much more forthcoming, generous, I would say. Maybe we want to qualify that, but I'd say it's a big change. And the Canadians a little bit too.
Well, I
I'd
think
say.
a really big change is, with the
Yeah.
president going up to Alaska to discuss climate change.
That's
and
true.
that was, one of the things that kept coming up in the whole Arctic Council concept.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
times are changing in challenging ways, I think.
Okay.
I mean, the Arctic Council had the benefit, I've always thought, in the 1990s of no longer being a focus of attention from the point of view of geopolitics.
Yes.
We weren't yet at that time so preoccupied with climate change as we are today.
Yes.
Oh, right.
So the Arctic seemed more remote in a sense. And also, it wasn't so front and center from an economic point of view. So, Arctic cooperation was comparatively easy
Yes. Well,
in political terms.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. Yes?
And the thing is with Indigenous participation, there was a very important and defining political time in Canada where Inuit and other Indigenous people sat with the First Ministers and the Prime Minister as equals to negotiate the Canadian
That's right.
Constitution Act 1982. And I think it was from that political climate that we brought that whole notion of permanent participants being permanent participants
Yes.
in the Arctic Council.
Right. And that's, I think, a fundamental innovation in international forums and organizations to have non-governmental, as it were, private organizations sitting there right with nation states.
I totally agree
And
because
it's really quite good.
I think Canada gets a lot of the credit for that. 'Cause
yes,
Yeah.
as you recall, in the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy, the predecessor,
Yes.
there was not a formal recognition of permanent participants.
No.
So this was the innovation, as you say, Frank,
Yeah.
in the Ottawa Declaration.
That's right.
And I think pushed really,
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have happened without the Canadian leadership with
Yes.
respect to
That's
that
right.
issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's
well,
quite interesting that many of us have participated in a lot of Arctic Council sessions since then. And the permanent participants really do sit at the table.
yes,
Yeah.
And they really do have an equal opportunity
Yes.
to participate in the discussion of the issues. I think in a way, the fact that the practice of the Arctic Council has evolved as a kind of consensual practice rather than a voting practice has
Yes.
been
Now-
beneficial in those terms
That's
because
right.
it's dampened the significance of the proposition that the permanent participants don't officially have a vote.
Yeah.
If you don't vote, it doesn't matter so
Doesn't
much
matter,
that
you
you
can
don't have a
talk.
vote.
But the one
right.
thing I do have a problem with
Yeah.
is the exclusionary process that the governments have exercised
Oh.
with respect to Indigenous peoples on certain issues,
Tell us.
such as Arctic sovereignty and Arctic security. And
Well, there's a standing order in the Arctic Council rules that there is to be no talk of military matters.
exactly.
That's not an exclusion to Inuit, I would say, or Indigenous people. That's just a blanket shutdown order.
But arguably
Yeah.
this may have been beneficial
Okay.
because if security in the traditional sense had been on the agenda,
Yeah.
it could very well have become a preoccupation or have
Well,
taken over a lot
Yes.
of the
That's quite
discussion.
right.
Whereas, and this gets us to the sustainability issue,
Yeah.
because security was not part of the agenda, the focus on sustainability became a more high-profile part of the
Yes, sir.
conversation in the Arctic Council.
Yeah, more productive too, and you could get to ways also of engaging the military in support of sustainable management and operation in the Arctic for search and rescue is one of the latest ways, because the military have platforms that can take you quickly to places you need to be in the Arctic. This includes Russia and everybody, and it's good they work together. That is a form of security building.
When I talk about security, I don't just talk about military security. You know, what I'm talking about are things like food security, environmental security, and these two issues are of particular importance to Inuit, as you know.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. But I would think from an Indigenous point of view, one of the challenges of the Arctic Council is that it's grown into such a large collection of activities, working groups, task forces, and so forth and so on. There are meetings taking place literally every week.
Yeah.
It's not just every so
Well,
often.
they have 76 working groups apparently now.
And whatever it is, 100 and some projects and so on. But from the point of view of the permanent participants, the challenge is to find the capacity, the people to go to all those meetings and to represent Indigenous concerns.
Right, and to read up on all this stuff and be in charge of it.
And to be informed, exactly.
right.
And
Exactly.
it's not easy because
No, it isn't.
if you look at the number of Inuit, there's only 155,000 Inuit living in 4 countries.
That's right. And most of you have other things to do.
And we have other things to do.
Rather than just running off to the next meeting in the next country.
Yeah.
So I think it's a real challenge in terms of having the capacity to participate in a well-informed and strong way in the range of things that are taking place within the Arctic Council.
It's also a
context.
challenge to the Council itself to keep the Inuit and the Indigenous voice alive and strong, and not for it to get overwhelmed by a whole lot of other business. Because if we lose that voice, I think the Arctic Council will be less sensitive, less adapted, more likely to override and maybe make mistakes in the Arctic.
And very likely to become a more sort of conventional intergovernmental body, which again in today's world with the challenges of a small planet and the real challenges of sustainability, what we don't need is something that's just a conventional intergovernmental business as usual.
What we need is a dynamic organization, and I think that we should close it at that.
That's not a bad idea.